Joining us from Capitol Hill, member of the Select Committee on Intelligence, Democratic Congressman Jim Himes of Connecticut. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Mika.
We can start with the Russia investigation and the president's tweets. This is bizarre. I'm feeling like there are dots that can be connected on a much higher level in terms of how this president is leading or dictating how he does his business. What's your biggest concern?
Well, I think my biggest concern, Mika, is that, he's out there with the Prime Minister of India talking about how important social media is. In the world of foreign policy, having a clear, well thought out voice is really, really important. And, we've just got examples every day of how his tweeting, now, remember his tweets on Qatar. Qatar was a country promoting terrorism. By the way, I'm not even sure he knew at the time. We've got 11,000 service people on the ground in Qatar at an air base that is pretty critical to us there. The Secretary of State has a totally different message. Now, we wake up to this charge that President Obama colluded, that he did nothing, which is completely false. And so, this is just certainly in the realm of foreign policy, a very, very dangerous thing, especially as you guys were talking about earlier, at a time when the president has laid down a threat, has drawn a red line for military activity in Syria. Are we to believe the Department of Defense, or are we to believe tweets? I'm not sure the world knows.
Mike Barnicle. So, Congressman, had you or to your knowledge, any member of the House Intelligence Committee received a heads up on that notification that came out?
I don't think so. I certainly did not. I read about it in the press like everybody else did late last night. So I can't speak for my colleagues, but I don't think anybody around here knew that was coming out. And Mike, this is really critical because the President of the United States threatened a war. And as a member of Congress, it is really, really important that the American people be reminded, quite apart from the wisdom of drawing a red line in Syria, we've seen that movie before, but the American people be reminded that the President of the United States cannot go to war without congressional authorization unless we have been attacked. And we need to watch very, very carefully what happens in the coming days here, because the president threatened to do just that.
What can you tell us about the day-to-day operations within Syria with regard to the United States forces, given the fact that the Russians have said that they're going to employ a no-fly zone of their own?
Well, it really highlights how very dangerous the Syrian battlefield is for a couple of reasons. Number one, as has been widely reported, we've got a lot of troops on the ground there now actually engaged in combat. As the press has reported, apparently they're shooting down Iranian drones, shot down a Syrian aircraft. Who's behind the Syrian aircraft? The Russians are. So, quite apart from the fact that if you've got people on the ground, one of them could get captured. We could see that individual in an orange jumpsuit, heaven forbid. Number two, we could find ourselves, face to face, gun to gun against the Russians. And maybe that's the right decision, but it's not the right decision if Congress hasn't deliberated it, if we haven't thought it through, if this is the product of the president's indigestion and an early morning tweet. It is too serious for it to happen that way.
Congressman, it's Willie Geist. Good to see you this morning. You mentioned that there is no evidence that President Obama colluded with Russia, as President Trump accused him of in that tweet. But there is, in the Washington Post last week, evidence that many people inside the Obama administration thought that not enough was done. There's the famous now quote that we kind of choked, coming from one unnamed official. Are you disappointed in the reaction from the Obama administration to Russian meddling?
Well, let's dispense with this idea of collusion on the Obama administration.
Right,
That's
I'm
just
not talking
absurd.
about collusion, but not doing enough.
I agree with that. At the time that the response was announced, and remember, the president tried. He mobilized the intelligence community. He reached out to Putin. John Brennan, head of the CIA, called up his counterpart in Russia. There were the sanctions that were taken.
But he didn't do enough, Congressman, did he?
He didn't. In my opinion, he didn't do enough. Putin is like a schoolyard bully. Every once in a while, that guy needs to get knocked down to understand that, particularly in a realm in which we are better than he is, and by the way, that's most realms, but in the cyber realm, we are better than he is. And I always felt that, guided by the idea of proportionality, which means that you sort of hit back about as roughly as you've been hit, that we should have done more. And that could have taken a lot of forms. But sadly, what I think Russia sees today is a slap on the wrist and an unwillingness on the part of the United States to use its offensive capability to make sure that anybody who attacks us, as they did on Election Day or prior to Election Day, is going to pay a pretty significant price for doing so.
All right, Congressman Jim Himes, thank you very much for coming on the show this morning.
And by the way,
Thank you.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.